Good evening, and welcome back to another episode of What's Your Story? Tonight we have the great privilege of sitting down with one of our local favorites. I don't say that a lot, by the way.
Yeah.
Well, maybe I do.
You're just saying that because I'm one of the local favorites.
Anyway, Andy Young is here with us in the hot seat tonight. Welcome to our set.
I appreciate your having me. Thanks.
So I was trying to think, when I first met you, I was attending a couple of the spelling bees that the Education Foundation of the Kennebunks.
Yep.
So you were one of the MCs there.
That's right.
And I said, man, this guy's funny. And your sidekick, Joe Foster, between the two of you,
I always thought I was Joe's sidekick. And back then, I used to call him my dad. Now I think I probably have to call him my brother. I've aged more than he has.
So where did you grow up? Where did you grow up, Andy?
I grew up in a place called Easton, Connecticut. I just tell people it's near Bridgeport because they've never heard of Easton. Lived there from the time I was old enough to remember until I tell people I'm from Connecticut for 30 years, everywhere for 10, and came up to Maine initially to work for the Portland Sea Dogs, and then to transition into teaching, which I've been doing at Kennebunk High School for the last 20 plus years.
Wow, 20 plus. So did you stay in Connecticut? Did you go off to college, or?
I went to I graduated from high school number 88 in my class of 180, smack dab, just barely in the top half. Went to the University of Connecticut, went to college because my guidance counselor laid out the other choices, which was cutting grass, pumping gas, or waiting tables. Mm-hmm. And those didn't seem like career choices, so I went to University of Connecticut, State University, that accepted me.
Yeah.
Back then, they accepted everybody from Connecticut automatically. I majored in business because, well, I figured you go to college, you get your degree, mess around for a couple of years, then get a job and wait around for your grandchildren. I majored in business also because there was no science requirement, no foreign language requirement. You didn't have to write papers. I go, oh, this is for me.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I ran into a little academic difficulty my first 4 freshman years, and it took me a while. But I graduated with a degree in English after a wide variety of roads. I was working at the campus radio station, the campus newspaper, doing things. Was a residence hall director for a while too, to pay the bills, and also because I liked it. And when I graduated, I found that I had no particular plan, so I went back to my old high school, where I was a substitute teacher. Mm-hmm. My mom was the principal secretary. That probably helped arrange that. I also coached boys soccer, girls soccer, boys basketball, girls softball, boys baseball.
Wow.
For a number of years. What I didn't realize then, what I realized looking back, is when they're looking for freshmen and JV coaches, if you got a guy with a pulse without a police record that gets along with the kids, he's hired.
You were a shoo-in.
I was available too. That was the other good point. I had my goal was actually I had worked at the campus radio station, done the radio and occasionally closed circuit television play-by-play for University of Connecticut baseball, hockey, and soccer. And my goal was to get a job broadcasting for a professional baseball team. I knew enough that major leagues probably weren't going to come calling for an unknown. So I sent resumes out for what seemed like forever. Mm-hmm. And finally, I got a call, and this was unfortunately, before you could mass produce letters. You had to type out everyone and white out those mistakes. Oh, it was awful. I wasn't a very good typist. And anyway, I sent a whole bunch out for a couple of years. I started off at the AAA level because I figured, well, who needs the low minors? And after 2 years of rejections or no hear-froms, I thought maybe I'll set my sights a little lower. Sent out a battery of letters in the fall of 1983, spring of 1984. Hadn't heard anything. Then got home one day and I had a phone message from a guy, name didn't sound familiar, but the area code was 907. I thought that was back when everybody only went, I think that's Alaska. And it turned out it was the Alaska Gold Panthers. It was a summer collegiate team in Fairbanks, Alaska. The guy was the general manager. He said he needed somebody to do the publicity and the radio play-by-play. And by the way, could I get up there that Friday? And again, I'm not the quickest study. I said, I don't know if my car's going to make it. And he said, if I could see his eyes rolling, we were thinking we might fly you. So I flew from Newark to Chicago to Anchorage to Fairbanks.
Wow.
And did a summer of professional baseball, well, semi-professional baseball for the Gold Panthers. They played a 2-month season in Alaska, and then we went down to a tournament in Omaha, Nebraska first, and then Wichita, Kansas. Went home from there, and the following spring I got a job for the professional team, the Durham Bulls in the Carolina League. They were an Atlanta Braves farm team.
Wow, that's awesome.
Oh, it was outstanding. Had I stayed another year, I would have been one of the extras in Bull Durham, which they filmed down there that fall. But boy, one summer of working 7 days a week, countless hours a day, and I said, all right, I don't want to do that anymore. So I went back to my no plan and subbed and coached for a while. And after that, I think I'm making a long story longer, but after 2 years of being a full-time educational technician at my old high school, working in a resource room and coaching some sports, I joined the Peace Corps. I decided I was going to end poverty and suffering by teaching, as it turned out, teaching basketball to small children in Guatemala. I don't know if I cured any poverty, but I did pick up some sort of internal affliction that's not available up here, and lost 35 pounds and was strongly advised to come back. And kind of did a little bit of this and a little bit of that, as in dug some irrigation ditches and cleaned some people's gutters and served food in cafeterias and that sort of thing, and landscaped for a bit. And I got a call in the summer of 1989 from my old boss in Durham, who was running a team in Burlington, North Carolina. He said, my play-by-play guy has quit. Can you come down and do 3 weeks for me? And I thought, 3 weeks, I could do 3 weeks of anything. So I went down, and against all odds, I had a blast. And he said, do you want to come back next summer? And I said, yeah. And that led to what turned out to be 12 more years in professional baseball. I spent a year in Burlington, went down to Vero Beach, Florida for 2 years, back to Burlington for 1, out to Butte, Montana for 1, and then got hired by the Portland Sea Dogs, which brought me to Maine, and as it turned out, brought me what I have to say is permanently.
Yeah. So that's how you got here. That's how you got to Maine. How do you prepare for, when you're doing, it always fascinates me. I mean, the color guy who is doing, talking about pizza or whatever else, not really the game, but just to add to, what you're doing, how do you prepare for a game?
Well, after a while, it becomes second nature. It's like anything else you're passionate about. I grew up watching and baseball on TV, listening to it on the radio. Our announcers of choice were Lindsey Nelson and Bob Murphy and Ralph Kiner, who did the Mets games. We had 2 favorite teams in my house. The Mets were one of them. Whoever the Yankees were playing was the other one. My dad said you couldn't hate a team, but you could root for the Red Sox this week and the Twins next weekend. And,
Exactly.
So he had that figured out. But I'd heard so many games, I kind of knew what they were supposed to sound like. And, I got my feet wet at UConn doing actual games. And then once you get out into professional ball, doing the games was easy. To me, looking back, the joy, I enjoyed everything about it, but particularly everywhere I went, I did a pregame show of which involved interviewing somebody from 5 to 15 minutes. It was baseball players, guys who were playing on the teams we were playing, guys on my team, old-time guys that played in the 1930s and 1940s every once in a while, and an umpire once in a while, and somebody who sold popcorn once in a while. And so, but I just loved doing what you're doing right now, which is interviewing. And in terms of preparing for the game, after a while, this was pre-internet, but back then, when the Fort Lauderdale Yankees came to town to play the Vero Beach Dodgers, I'd go over to their clubhouse and start asking questions. And I'd talk to other media people, newspaper or radio people around the league. And after a while, I got to know a lot of people. And I also had an added advantage. I was just a baseball nerd as a kid. I mean, I had baseball cards out the wazoo and played until they started throwing curveballs. And so I had all this information which many people might find useless, but I turned out to be very useful, because when
Yeah.
you talk to somebody who's, who played in the major leagues in the 1940s or 50s, and you know in your head who he is and where he played, and boy, they really open up.
So you did prepare though. 'Cause
Oh,
I
absolutely.
mean, that history, knowing I think the stats, knowing all of that, you got to be like constantly, right?
I
When you're
see
not
it-
just calling it the game, but there's a lot of fill.
One of the things I've learned, I don't know if it's from living or being a teacher, boy, if you're motivated enough, most human beings, with rare exceptions, if you're motivated enough, you can do anything and you can remember anything. I can't remember the secret computer password from today till tomorrow, but for back then and even now, I don't, tell you the truth, I don't follow baseball so much anymore, because my dad, he was about 40 years early on his prediction, but he said, you might outgrow it. And of course I thought, what a foolish man. But he was right. Plus, for years I knew people in Major League Baseball. I had people to root for, and these days they're all impossibly young, and they make too much money, and the owners make too much money, and it's not that attractive of a product
totally
anymore.
Agree. Yeah. By the way, password, just always try that one.
Oh,
If you're stuck, just use the word password.
yeah.
So as far as listening to, you said a few of the commentators, but did you have a favorite that you say, oh, I want to sound like him?
Oh, I loved Lindsey Nelson, and I never could have sounded like him, because he was this Southern gentleman from Tennessee who had a fascinating. I read his autobiography years ago, and he's been dead for decades, I think. But he was a soft-spoken gentleman from Tennessee. He wore these bizarre sport jackets that looked like they were made out of different patchwork quilts. That was kind of his trademark. But he just, I think with broadcasters in general, baseball in particular, you fall in love with who you grew up with. Around here, they love Joe Castiglione. Joe Castiglione's been doing Red Sox games for 40 plus years.
Yeah.
He's part of the family.
Yeah.
When I was growing up, and it's funny, Lindsey Nelson, Bob Murphy, and Ralph Kiner were the three original Met announcers, and they didn't have it. Those were the only three that I ever knew. And years later, when I came back from school, I mean, they were still Mets games, but they didn't sound right. And the new guys were just fine. And I imagine that those who are still into baseball today, actually one of them was a fella named Gary Cohen. And Gary Cohen followed me as the announcer for the Durham Bulls. The year I left, he went in there, and I'm not sure what his trajectory was, but he ended up doing the Mets games, and as far as I know, he still does. And he does a terrific job. And I would imagine that dyed-in-the-wool Mets fans love him today, just like they love, I'll bring up names that only baseball nerds would know. They loved Bob Prince in Pittsburgh, and they loved By Sam in Philadelphia. And they loved Phil Rizzuto and his sidekicks with the Yankees. And he was, I have to say, we didn't like the Yankees, but boy, when the Yankees were way behind, you had to tune in, because he would talk about the Cannolis or Bill White's kids, or he just, he was a stream of consciousness, and you had to love that.
So I think listening to a game is very different than watching a game. Would you agree with that?
Yes. First of all, listening to a game, I can remember raking leaves listening to the games, or washing dishes or drying dishes listening to games. The other thing, too, and I'm going to sound like a grouchy old guy, which well, at least part of that is true, ball games now are 3.5 hours. And I can't, I don't know that I can listen that long. I definitely can't sit and watch that long. One of the, at the time, tragedies of my life, in 1969, the New York Mets, who had been a dead last place team for their entire history, went from 9th place to 1st place and won the World Series in 1 year. Games 3, 4, and 5, the last 3 games of the World Series, I never got to see, because by the time we got home from school at 3:30, they were over. The long one took 2.5 hours.
I know. I didn't like that. I didn't like that when they would have those afternoon games. I'd go screaming off the bus and zip into my house.
If you had a cool teacher, in fact, I remember in Mrs. Waterman's class, I had one of those earphones taped all the way up my arm to the transistor radio in the pocket, and I was sitting here like this, just listening to what was supposed to be pre-algebra, and every once in a while going like this when we heard Al Weiss hit a home run, which didn't seem possible since he only hit one all regular season, but he hit a big one in Game 5.
So what do you say to your students now when somebody's doing that?
Well, you know something, now it's more like they're looking at their phone,
Yeah.
and I generally take the phones at the start of class, which we're strongly advised to do at the high school.
Yeah.
And something that's a dictum I have no problem following. On one hand, I think that these electronic devices are taking away the next generation's imagination and ability to use their brain. On the other hand, I know that I'm probably sounding exactly like someone who used to drive a covered wagon who was complaining about those horseless carriages.
And that guy listening on his transistor, yeah.
The world is changing, but it is too bad. And again, in terms of, I'm very lucky at the high school now. I don't run into a lot of people that get distracted because through a number of factors, good luck and a department head who's awfully good to me, my classes are virtually all seniors, grade 12 students.
Yeah.
And I've found a 17 and 18-year-old, there's always an element of adult in them. And if you treat them like regular human beings, they tend to treat you like a regular human being back.
Yeah.
Sort of like people of all ages. But I really enjoy the seniors. And also, I've had the English classes that I teach, we stress a number of things, but reading, writing, listening, speaking, thinking, the most important literacy skills.
Yeah.
And I have to sell them on the fact that these are going to be helping you regardless of whether you're going to college, whether you're going to junior college, whether you're going into the military, whether you're going into the workforce, whether you're doing a combination of those things.
Yeah.
They're going to help you be successful and happy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's an easy sale to make because A, I believe in it, and B, those kids are 99% of them are mature enough to realize, hey, this guy's telling us the truth.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's and how we deliver it, it first depends on the class. But I'm right where I belong, even if I didn't take the most direct route to get there.
How did so you've had 2 classes that have graduated through the pandemic, right?
Yes.
2?
Yeah.
How do you feel about, what happened? Were those kids, did you keep them connected? Do you feel like they were ready for the world?
The world.
I mean, I just would hear stuff from parents about like their assignments and the fact that kids weren't motivated, but.
It's funny. I had seniors through the 2 pandemic years. I had some who thought remote schooling was the greatest thing since sliced bread. They were home by themselves or home with an attentive,
Focused.
but not an attentive but not overly nosy parent. They didn't have distractions, and they wrote terrific papers, and they just got involved.
Yeah.
And they took part in class conversations, albeit remotely. On the other hand, there were previously honor students who it was the worst nightmare in the world because, they may have 2 or 3 younger siblings, or they may have, there's who knows what's going on at home.
Right.
And it's funny, in terms of preparing them for the world that we're preparing them for is not the world that you and I went into.
Right.
And it's hard to say. On one hand, we do all our parent conferences remotely now, and from a convenience factor, I suppose that's good. But because teachers have things to do, parents have things to do. But doing what we're doing right now, conversing, expressing ourselves, listening to what somebody else has to say, processing and responding appropriately, those are skills that are every so often I'll run into one of my students that's really good at it.
Yeah.
And on one hand, I rejoice. On the other hand, the fact that he or she sticks out for these skills is a lot of people. Conversation is a lost cause.
Yeah.
A lost art. I hope it's not a lost cause.
Yeah. A lost art. I know what you mean.
So it's. But that said, during the pandemic, as was the case beforehand and now afterward, there's a direct correlation between how much a kid puts into their education in their individual classes and how much benefit they'll derive. And I'm acutely aware of that because I was someone that put very little effort into my education in high school and mostly in college, and as a result, I didn't get much out of it. And I'm old enough to know that the blame for that lies virtually entirely with me. And I got it eventually,
Okay.
and I have
Yeah.
confidence that these other folks will too.
We have, do you have students that are looking to go into teaching? And if they are, what do you say to them?
From time to time, I'll have someone that will tell me that's what they want to do. More often, it's generally girls. I've had a guy once in a while. First thing I do is I encourage them and I tell them it's the best thing they'll ever do. I don't necessarily tell them if I had done it before age 30, there's no limit to the amount of damage I could have done. But these ones are usually a little more mature. I can't encourage them enough. I mean, it's the Jackie Robinson's, here we go back to baseball, Jackie Robinson's gravestone. I'm not going to be able to quote it verbatim, but there's a quote on there that essentially says the value of a person's life is, it doesn't have anything to do with dollars, or it's the effect it's had on other lives.
Right,
and
right.
as teachers, we're cheating because, I mean, the teachers, and I'll put coaches in that category too. I said when I went into this, I want to impact lives. Well, the good news is, if you're a teacher or coach, you will impact lives.
Yeah.
The sobering news is, 100% you're going to impact them for better or for worse. I had teachers, not many of them, but I've still got a couple in my head who said some things to me that were not terribly complimentary, which I probably deserved, but boy, they're still in my head. And I know people that never played basketball after the third grade because of that mean coach that made them feel bad. I still run into people who, for whatever reason, I mean, there's people that I didn't like science or foreign language mostly because it was too much work. I have people that don't like reading and writing. They tell me they flat out hate English. One of my, what I think strong point is, no one has ever left my class, any class I've taught, I believe, hating English and language arts. Occasionally, if it's a pre-existing condition, I can't correct it entirely. But in terms of how if a kid says, geez, I want to teach, I will tell them, first of all, UMaine Farmington is the Rolls Royce of teaching colleges, although, boy, we've had some pretty amazing people come out of UNE. We have some people on our faculty now who are half my age that I look up to because of how remarkable they are at what they do.
What do you think the difference is when it comes to that? I mean, are they having a whole different approach to teaching, or like old school versus new school? I don't know.
If you give me 10 different teachers, there's probably 10 different answers.
All right.
First and foremost, they have to like kids.
Yeah.
Every so often, we've had people, I've worked with people, not many, but some, who know their content inside and out. But they're not crazy about immature high school students. And the problem is, when you talk about immature freshman boys, that's redundant. I mean, it's required.
Yeah.
There are, and that can be frustrating. But again, everybody deals with it differently. In my case, I know I was the worst of the bad, and I owe these people a little bit of patience. We have, I mean, Kennebunk is so full of outstanding teachers, and there are people who are really good at what they do, but how they do it differs from classroom to classroom, and in some cases from class to class. So I can have a lesson plan block 1 that is the greatest thing since sliced bread, and then try the same thing block 4, and it falls flatter than a pancake with a different group of 17-year-olds that on paper is the same as that one that I was brilliant with.
Yeah. Have you ever had siblings that you've read a paper and you say, gee, this looks and sounds familiar, and it comes from the same household?
I have a very funny story on that line. For years, I carpooled. I have a fair 40 to 45-minute commute to down here.
Yeah.
And for years, I carpooled with anywhere from 1 to 3 other individuals. And one year, we had 4 of us every day. Melissa Lucci, who still teaches at the school, she's a science teacher. Lisa Blyer, who was an English teacher, and Emily Flaherty, who was a science teacher. And the 4 of us, I had if I didn't drive, I always had the front seat because I was the biggest. But
tallest.
Tallest, yes. Well, and maybe I'm going to compliment the nice ladies, the biggest too. Every day there were 2 in the front and 2 in the back, and we, at the time, we all taught freshmen. And we had, so there was always something to talk about. You always had two people in front. Conversations are always interesting. One afternoon, I was telling the ladies about this incredible paper that this girl wrote. I had her in this freshman class, and they had to write a piece of memoir, and it was wonderful. And I'm describing it, and Lisa, who's the other English teacher, says, "Wait a minute, was it about dolls in the attic?" And then, well, she had the older sister. And boy,
So what do you do?
You go and you have the kid in, you say, "Hey, guess what? You didn't write this paper." Now, do you want to write me a real paper, or do we bring mom and dad into this guy?
Yeah.
But no, it was funny. I remember telling her she would get aghast and embarrassed and probably a little scared. And I said, just so you know, this is outrageously bad luck. I mean, but the lesson here is there's always bad luck possible.
Yeah.
I bet I'd like to think she didn't do it again.
Yeah, I bet she didn't. I bet she didn't. So in the last few years, you have been writing.
Yes.
I would say not more than a few years, but you've been writing and actually putting things together and making books.
Yes, I've been writing.
So we've got a few of them on our shelf, by the way.
It's good. I hope they're getting dog-eared from being taken out. I began writing. I was one of those people that wrote. My grandfather lived with us, and he wrote letters to the editor all the time, angry about one politician or another. And I was an occasional letter to the editor writer, and I wrote one. Interestingly, I had a couple things published in the Portland Press Herald, which were sports related way back when.
I think my husband still has one of your articles on his bulletin board.
Oh, he's clearly a man.
Big fan.
He's a man of exquisite tastes. I had written a letter to the editor of the newspaper. It was called I have to think of the name. It was the Community Leader. It was a free weekly. It ran for about 2 years out of Falmouth. The sports editor had written something that was very critical of Grady Little, the manager of the Boston Red Sox. He had, everyone was all over his case for leaving Tim Wakefield in too long, or leaving Pedro Martinez in too long, and then they ended up losing in extra innings to blankety blank Aaron Boone's home run off Tim Wakefield. Well, I wrote a letter. Now, I know Grady Little. I knew Grady Little. Grady Little managed the Kinston Blue Jays when I was the announcer for the Durham Bulls. Grady Little's a good guy. So I wrote a letter to the editor, reasonably articulate, where I said, well, let me tell you something. Grady Little's going to get him. They fired Grady Little. Grady Little's going to get himself a World Series ring a lot faster than anybody on the Red Sox will, which shows how smart I was, because I'm not sure if Grady ever got one. The Red Sox got quite a few. But anyway, the editor of the paper says, well, how would you like to write for us? She was looking for content. And I said, sure. And what do you want me to write on? Anything you want. She told me, I don't know if it was arbitrary, she said 800 words is about what you want to do. And I asked why. She said, well, nobody wants to read more than 800 words. And so I pretty religiously kept it under 800 words. And when I started, of course, I threw my heart and soul into everything. And now I look back at some of those pieces and I can't believe my name is on there. Thank goodness it was pre-internet. But the Community Leader went out of business, but one of their competitors, which was the Yarmouth Shopping Notes, picked me up. And then, and I forget which came first, but I started writing for unfortunately, the now defunct Biddeford newspaper, the Journal Tribune. And went through 4 managing editors there, all of whom were wonderful. And it was interesting because writing for the Yarmouth paper and for the Falmouth paper and for the community papers, I write for one in Wyndham now, it has to be very family friendly and no political stuff. In Biddeford, the more controversial the better. Go to town, we want people reading the paper, and obviously it didn't work well enough.
And it ran twice a day.
Yes, it was so that was, and I enjoyed that. But when they went south, every so often karma, for better or worse, karma is either going to help you or bite you. And karma helped me. The last managing editor at the Biddeford Journal was a fellow named Ed Pierce. He's a a dedicated, a career journalist. He's been doing this his entire life,
Yeah.
been all over the country, had a marvelous life. He's when the Biddeford paper went under, he was ready to retire. He picked up edited a small weekly in New Hampshire for a bit, and then somehow he got the job over in Biddeford, and he inherited me as a weekly columnist, and we had some shared interests. It turns out he's a baseball nerd too, and when he took over a paper called the Windham Eagle, which is a weekly up in Windham, he said, "Hey, you want to write some columns up here?" And I said, "Yeah." And arbitrarily on my, I've been writing columns for 15 years, so the book that you've been kind enough to put up here is the most recent one. It's called Works in Progress. Chose the title because that's what they are and that's what we are.
Yeah.
They're a collection, I think it says, of 112 columns, several of which are pretty good. The rest you have to, the challenge is to pick out which ones they are. I wrote one earlier that was called Young Ideas, stolen from somebody else.
Yeah.
Actually, my midlife crisis goal, I would love to publish a book. Bottom line, I put it together, 50 copies together for my friends and family for Christmas gifts.
Yeah.
Writing a book's not very easy, and getting rid of those typos that drive me crazy when I see them in other people's books, it's not, holy cow, it's pretty darn humbling. I did 50 copies of Young Ideas, 25 of them with color pictures and 25 of black and white. And when you find out what it costs to do color, black and white's just fine.
Right.
And then my sister, both my sister and brother are far beyond the student that I was. My sister and I took out some of the typos and we redid it.
Yeah.
And we sold a few, and they went over pretty well. So I put this one together, and I got a professional woman to help me lay it out because my technology skills are nil. Her name is Lori Harley, and if you're thinking of putting together a book out there, call this woman in Portland. She's
That's great.
fantastic, passionate about her job. This one has an ISBN number and everything. I'm a real boy now, Pinocchio. And I think I have one more in me because since I've started working...
We hope you do.
I hope so too. I'm going to knock wood without knocking the book over. Since I've been writing for Ed Pierce, which began in July of 2020 in mid-pandemic, every column I do each week is exactly 600 words. No more, no less, which to me is going to be the next book because if nothing else, it's unique. And
That's what you could call it too.
Well, I've got this picture in my mind.
600 words.
I'm picturing a picture on the cover of somebody writing the world in 600 well-chosen, carefully considered. No. Bottom line, 600 words.
Idea.
I just need to get the artist to. And actually, it's funny that I should give a shout out to the person who did the drawings, the illustrations for both books. It was Mary Couturier, who was a freshman in high school when she did the first one. Did the illustrations for this, which was in my mind for years as part of her senior project, and she's now a college graduate.
Isn't that great?
So it was neat to do that.
Yeah.
And so it's writing does for me now what playing basketball and softball and soccer and street hockey until I don't want to tell you how old I was did for many years. It's my passion. I love to do it, and the fact that I get to teach it. And when I'm teaching writing, it's one of the few times in my life I don't have to feel like a phony. I announced those baseball games. I couldn't hit a curveball.
But it's an art to be able to announce those games.
It is.
Really is.
It is, and it is an art, and I love doing it.
Yeah.
But in retrospect, it's not curing cancer.
Well, but we need. We need to be able to have those pleasures of getting out of what's happening in the real world.
I just cross my fingers that the coming generations feel that way too, because again, they have instant gratification available 24/7. And
could we, if we researched, could we listen to a clip somewhere of your calling a game, or do you have anything?
I have a bunch of old...
Anything on YouTube?
Old reel-to-reel, old cassette tapes in my basement. I have no idea what to do with. If someone wants them and puts them on, you are welcome to them. somewhere I've got, and again, it's on a tape somewhere. I have my audition tape that got me the Sea Dog job.
Yeah.
And that one might be fun to listen to only because it's 3 separate innings of games that I did for the Butte Copper Kings in the Pioneer League. It was 1994. We were arguably the worst team in professional baseball, pretty close to it. It was a team of undrafted free agents in the Pioneer League, great guys.
Yeah.
Had just for one reason or another hadn't been drafted by a big league team. Maybe not enough velocity on the fastball, maybe not fast enough, maybe a lot of power, but no arm, whatever. But we played in Butte, Montana's a mile above sea level, so the ball flies.
Oh, yeah.
Matter of fact, we hit 306 as a team, which for baseball fans, that's pretty remarkable. What almost as remarkable is losing 2/3 of your games to hit that, because our pitchers gave up a lot of hits and a lot of home runs. But we had 3 memorable games. That one of them we were losing 6-0 going to the bottom of the 9th inning, and the wind started blowing out because a storm was coming, and there were 3 home runs. We won 7-6. Another one I think was the 9th and 10th innings of a game that we ended up winning 23-22 against Billings, where we had led 20-6 after the 6th inning, and the manager pulled all the starters, and unfortunately Billings came back. But there were 3 bizarre games. Somewhere I'll have to find those. Well, I know
Be
right where they
fun
are.
to listen to that. Did you stay up for the game the other night that went on and on and on?
I have well, I don't know if it's a terrible confession. I don't have a TV in my house.
Oh.
I haven't turned one on
Okay.
for 20 years. I do every so often. I was at the computer and I realized, oh, this thing is in the 16th inning.
And a kid from Maine.
Oh, that's yes, from the University of Maine, Jeremy Pena. I did know that. It's funny. At this point, again, I'm so busy between teaching and commuting and still being a dad.
Yeah.
It's pretty active. There's not a lot of spare time, and the no TV in the house was a conscious choice. But even I haven't seen a World Series game. I can't tell you in how long. It's got to be at least a decade, because I can't stay up that late.
Yeah, I know. It is late, but the couple of those afternoon games that go on, if they're starting out in the other coast or something like that, it's kind of fun to.
It is, and that's the one thing about all these, and again, without going too off on the side street of baseball, it's about making money. That's why they have the extra teams in there. But it seems a shame that
I know
St. Louis and the Mets and potentially the Yankees are going to go out like that after winning a whole lot of ball games. And the Dodgers too, I should say. I mean, the National League, the 5th and 6th best teams, one of them is going to go to the World Series. And it does seem a shame that, after 162 games of proving you're the best, in the case of the Cardinals, 2 games and they're out. The Mets got 3, the Dodgers got 4.
And that's it. That's the way it happens. But as we get to wrap up our interview here, we have a little bit of a rapid fire, 1-word answer kind of thing. Is that okay?
Password. Oh, okay, yes.
That's right. Favorite ice cream?
Vanilla.
Vanilla.
Well,
okay.
if I can get apple pie ice cream, I make it a 2.
Favorite movie? Don't say Bull Durham. You can.
Pee-wee's Big Adventure, Animal House, Caddyshack. Flip a coin. A 3-sided coin.
Okay. Favorite book besides Works in Progress and Young Ideas?
Ball 4 made me a reader.
Ball 4, okay.
I thought reading was for nerds. And I was a knuckle-dragging jock or a knuckle-dragging wannabe jock that would never read again. And then I read Ball 4. And to this day, I'm one of those, I practically have the thing memorized. It made me a reader. The book spoke to me. My dad bought it. My dad brought a paperback copy, gave me a lecture. He wasn't particularly into baseball, and there were some bad words in there and some accounts of things. He said, gave me the, write that, right. I got it at 6:30 at night, and I finished it at 4:30 the next morning with my brother complaining from the lower bunk, "Stop shaking the bed, you're laughing so hard."
Yeah, great book. I
Loved
agree.
it. Loved
I agree.
it. Oh.
Yeah, that is a good one. What about a restaurant? Do you eat out much, or?
No.
Yeah, because you're probably going from here to there.
Yeah, I'm one of those people. I actually like to cook. I have a son who still lives with me that loves to cook.
Yeah.
My youngest son, who's a junior in high school, and I've just never been able to wrap my arms around. I mean, I could feed myself for a week for what it cost me to go out to a restaurant.
Yeah.
I had a passion for Chinese food that started. We never ate out as kids. We just didn't do it.
Yeah.
And I remember going to a Chinese restaurant at age 18. The boss of the Apple Barn took all the kids out at the close of the season. We went for Chinese food. My mom gave me the lecture about, being, you be polite and say thank you and try everything. And I was looking at this scary looking weird stuff. And by the end of that meal, I had loosened my belt 2 notches. And I thought, I can't believe I just wasted 18 years. But now as my metabolism changes, I can't necessarily do all the damage to the all-you-could-eat buffet as I once did.
Coolest place you've ever been? Not temperature.
Boy, that's a tough one. I loved Butte, Montana in the Northwest.
Okay.
I went to St. John's, Newfoundland with the Portland Pirates. I'd love to go back there. I was just there for 2 days to do a couple of games.
Yeah.
Places Nova Scotia, New Brunswick.
Yeah.
In fact, I haven't been to every one of the United States yet, but I have been to every Canadian province.
Oh, wow.
And if I get to Hawaii, I'll have all the states too.
There you go.
And what I found out is, Saskatchewan and Manitoba aren't a whole lot more interesting than Kansas and Nebraska. A lot of good wheat there.
And what about, do you see yourself going back to, maybe when you retire someday from teaching, do you see yourself like being back in a box and calling?
Boy, I hadn't really thought of it. At the moment, I plan on teaching for a while.
Yeah.
As long as I feel I'm good at it and they want me, and I'm making a difference, I'd like to do that. Again, a lot of it depends on health. I had a mild health scare last winter that suggested to me that apparently I'm not going to be living forever either.
Oh, yeah.
I knew other people wouldn't.
Yeah, that does happen.
It's I've pretty much decided for a fact that I will not be the exception. But it's funny. If I would hate to retire from teaching. I would retire to something if there was something that I got that from my grandfather, who was worked for 40 years at Singer Sewing Machines in Bridgeport, Connecticut.
Wow.
Came back from World War I, got an engineering job, and he had a 6th grade education, but that's all anybody had back then. And he went to a retirement dinner for a guy he worked with for 40 years, and afterwards he told him, "Oh, we're really gonna miss you, but I'm happy you're." I'm happy for you, but we're going to miss you. I'm sorry you're retiring from Singers. And this guy went to my grandfather, "Young man," to a guy who's probably 63 or 64, says, "Young man, I'm not retiring from anything. I'm retiring to my machine shop and to my garden and to my grandchildren and to the Rotary Club." And he had all these great things going on. And my grandfather took that to heart. He was working into his 80s. And again, now if some publisher out there says, "Boy, we've read your books and they are something else. We want you to put something together for us. Here's $200,000 to get started." I would have to think strongly about accepting that offer. Okay. But until then, hard to say what's next.
So you live up in Cumberland. For those of us that don't venture out too much, is there something really cool in your town or your area to do if someone took a trip up there?
Well, go look at Portland.
Go look at Portland, okay.
It's like a lot of towns. It's socioeconomically, it's similar to Kennebunk or Kennebunkport without the shoreline.
Yeah.
There's a lot of great nature trails. There's a place called Knights Pond Nature Preserve, which I walk through all winter. I'd love to walk through it all summer, but I had a little wrestling match with what's the disease the ticks carry?
Oh, Lyme.
Oh, Lyme. Yes, Lyme disease. Oh, I don't want that again. So I wait for a good hard freeze or two before I go up there.
Yeah, there you go.
What I do up there is watch a lot of soccer and baseball games, but that's because I'm refereeing or umpiring them. So I find that interesting.
That's fun. That's really fun. So you mentioned, is it 2 kids?
3.
3, okay.
My oldest son is 21, my daughter's 19, and my younger son will turn 17 next month, or November of
Yeah.
2022, just in case
Yeah.
people are watching this in 20 years. But yeah, no, they've all gone to Cumberland schools, and like me, they are all in their own way finding the next.
You are a
next
busy
path.
guy.
Yeah, but you know something, I don't sit still very well.
Well, and not having a TV is probably, you spend your time wisely.
Yes, or
And I
less
say that-
foolishly.
Yeah, and I say that because that's what I do when I go home. It's a bad habit. I have to say it's a bad habit.
The
But
one thing I would love to get an extra hour of time a day. But I love my job and I love my house, and
Yeah.
neither one's moving anytime
yeah,
soon.
good for you.
At some point, when my youngest son graduates, I've looked into I looking into moving a little closer to down here. But
Yeah.
I checked out a couple of real estate websites, and unless there's a
You got
quantum drop in property
yeah,
value.
Yeah, I was going to say it's really getting tough around here.
The
Yeah.
good news is apparently we can
So-
get a king's ransom for our house up my way too, but then you have to find a place to live down here.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
ones I can afford have a Moon or Fido written over the door, and that's
Yeah, I gotcha.
it's. But yeah, no, I at the moment I'm not going to say retirement is the furthest thing from my mind, but there's other things that take priority.
Gotcha. Well, thank you for spending time with us this afternoon. And where could I buy a copy of this book before we go?
Well, there are several options. Sherman's bookstores are carrying them in Falmouth, Wyndham, Freeport, and Portland, I believe, and there's shortly I'm going to have them sent upstate.
Yeah.
However, if you want to buy them directly through me, that might be easier because
Get some in your car.
in fact, I never leave home without them. I have some in school, and I made an unusual agreement. The people at Sherman's are wonderful.
Yeah.
They, the fact they're taking my book in, and
Yeah.
the people I deal with, it could not be nicer.
Yeah.
But due to some faulty figuring on my part, it actually costs me money when I sell one.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
But my, let's see, I guess it's okay to say this. I have my double secret email address is harrybright13 at gmail.com,
Okay.
HarryBright13. And if you, this Harry Bright managed the Durham Bulls in 1985. 13's used to be my jersey number. That's where that came from.
I love it.
If you get a hold of me that way, I will find you and
Okay.
figure a way to get you a book.
Good to know. Good to know. Well, thank you for being our guest tonight. And we thank you all for tuning in. And we will see you right back here next time on What's Your Story?